Hello friends, I am Dr. Amarjeet Kaur. I am professor at Gurugram University. I have been working from the last 30 years in food industry as well as into education industry. I have authored 56 research papers and 8 books. So today I am going to discuss about crisis communication in business organization as a part of business communication. It's a very interesting topic. Actually, anybody or everybody whosoever works in a business, they are going to come across some kind of crisis and they need to learn how to deal with that or how to communicate during those days. So, I would request you to be with me for the next 1 hour to discuss on crisis communication in organization. So, in the first part, we are going to talk about what crisis is, what is crisis, what type of crisis do we have, what are the salient feature of crisis, what is crisis communication, what is the need of crisis communication or importance of crisis communication, and in the second half, we will talk about crisis communication plan or strategy in detail, and we will discuss few examples which are quoted worldwide as best examples to learn how to deal with the crisis through communication. Well friends, so we all have heard this word crisis. So what is the meaning of the word crisis? You must have some idea. To me, crisis is something which is unwanted. Any unwanted event at any workplace, if we have to take it as a business crisis, right? So, any unwanted event at any workplace is taken or is known as crisis. Okay. So, important thing is the crisis arises with a very short notice or with no notice, and it leads to a feeling of threat, feeling of danger, right, amongst the stakeholders who are involved with the business. It could be customers, it could be employees, management, it could be suppliers, government. So it leads to kind of threat and danger in the mind of stakeholders. So unwanted event happening at a workplace, at a business, leading to threat, leading to danger signs is what we know as crisis. Okay. So in simple word, the crisis has a potential to actually cause tremendous harm to the organization because it leads to ambiguity, right? So that ambiguity can actually cause any kind of harm to the business, to the employee, to the customers, so any stakeholder for that matter. Now, there are many types of crises which we come across. The first is natural crisis. In the history of mankind, we have probably seen the biggest ever natural crisis in terms of coronavirus. We are still going through that. We are not completely out of the crisis. Okay. So, any such natural crisis may happen and businesses would get affected. Okay. So, that is one type of crisis. Natural crisis could be in terms of drought, in terms of flood. Our neighboring country is facing a very severe flood situation. Thousands of people are died. This is what I just heard on news today itself. We all know this pandemic, we all are well aware how adversely it has affected businesses across the world, especially the hospitality industry. They are almost shut. Aviation industry, they are completely, struggling to overcome the loss they have borne in the last few months. Then we have organizational crisis. So the complete whole organization status or as an entity, there is some crisis. Crisis of the entity, crisis in the terms of organization, that is another type of crisis. Then we have very common crisis nowadays is technological crisis. Suddenly power failure and the plant is going to shut down. Production is going to shut down because of some technological failure. So that is another crisis companies do face. We have financial crisis. companies have short of liquidity, short of funds to pay the long term debts, etc., etc., and that crisis leads to anxiety, leads to endangered and brand of the company. So that is financial crisis. Then we have confrontation crisis. So there could be a possibility that a business just confronted the idea, the ideology, the philosophy of some other organization, of some regulatory body, and then they face a problem. So we call it as confrontation crisis. There could be crisis of malevolence, right? There could be crisis of bankruptcy. So company is almost bankrupt because it doesn't have enough money to pay salaries, to pay immediate demands for the loans it has, or any money it owes to the people. Then crisis of workplace violence. Even in the Indian industry, we have seen workplace violence in one of the very famous automobile industry, company, right? There was a workplace violence, one person or two person were died. It's almost few years now when that incident happened in NCR only, right? So that crisis of workplace violence is quite possible. Then the last thing could be there's a crisis of management values. We have seen Satyam case in the history of Indian industry, where there was a crisis of the values of the MD. He indulged into malpractice, into fraudulent practices, and that led to such an anxiety, anxiousness amongst the investors that finally the company was declared insolvent, was taken over by some other company. So we could have any type of crisis. That's something we need to remember. But whichever type of crisis is this, it is actually leading to kind of uncertainty, ambiguity in the mind of stakeholders. Okay. Then there are certain characteristics of crisis which are known as universal. You will see whenever a crisis comes in, or a society faces a crisis, these are few common characteristics or salient features in them. So crisis always come as a surprise. So the first characteristics of crisis is this comes as surprise. Then it brings along with panic in the mind of stakeholders, employees, owners even, management even, right? So panic is another thing which is which comes along with crisis. Then during the time of crisis, the information which is available is not sufficient all the time. We may call it as insufficient information, because few stakeholders may have sufficient information, others may not have. So some part of the people or of the stakeholders is certainly having short of sufficient information or relevant information. Then the next feature is escalating flow of events. The events, the happenings, they keep on flowing one after the another, and they are escalating the problem, right? That is a very common feature of how a crisis progresses. Then loss of control. Businesses may lose control on the business, right? So that loss of control is very common. Businesses do not have control over the situation. It could be financial, it could be natural crisis. So generally crisis seems that things are in the initial time, sometime things are going haywire and company is actually in control of the event rather than company controlling the event. So loss of control is quite a possibility, and it happens, it is one of the characteristics in crisis. Then the next characteristics of crisis is this: there's an intense pressure. So there's a scrutiny from outside the outside world. People are scrutinizing what is happening in the business, what is happening to product, what is happening to process, what is happening to the company, the entity itself, the organization. So there's a lot of pressure coming from the outside, because suddenly you will see media gets interested, everybody who has never heard even about the business will get interested about that happening. Seize mentality is another characteristics of crisis. So mentality is seized, blocked. So that's another issue. Whatever the narrative comes out of the first instance, it takes some time to seize it, right? So that mentality is blocked. So to make an outbreak through that mentality, it takes some time. And then in the crisis or during the crisis time, the focus is on short term. Focus is to deal with the pressure, to deal with that issue in hand. Instead of working on the long run, companies need to work immediately on short term focus by focusing on what is required immediately. Right? Now this was crisis. If I move further and if I talk about what is crisis communication. So crisis communication refers to the communication plan itself, which focuses on protecting the reputation of organization and maintaining its public image. So it's very, very important statement. Protecting the reputation of organization, and we want to maintain the public image. Every company is perceived in a particular manner, in a particular way in the mind of public, right? So that image has been built over years. Whatever the image they are able, a low cost company or high product or high quality company, whatever kind of image that company has developed so far, it took some time reasonably, right? So to maintain that public image, it's very important that business communication plan is there. And basically this is what the crisis communication is, that if we the whole purpose of crisis communication is to protect the reputation of the business or image of the business. So crisis communication refers to special division of a firm which handles the reputation of the individual as well as the company in total. The company is made of individuals, as we all know. Right, so there could be a crisis because simply somebody made a statement. Some individual made a statement because that individual is authorized, is working in the company, but somehow he made a wrong statement, right? So the crisis communication actually refers to special division of the company which handles with some reputation of individual as well as reputation of the organization. So the whole purpose, as I said, is actually maintaining the brand in the mind of customers or maintaining the brand image. We talk about the product or the process. So this crisis communication experts, they do fight against several challenges. So now these challenges, these factors could be cyber attack, some criminal attack, some government investigation, some raid, income tax raid. So if there's an income tax raid in one of the company's owner's home near to your place, how would you take it? You understand that, I hope, right? So you will not perceive that company as a good company. If there's a media which is attacking or media raising some inquiry about the practice, about the product company is facing any problem about, then certainly these factors have very important role to play in the crisis communication. Okay, so what is crisis? When a crisis occurs, it could be any business. When it does occur, the need to communicate timely becomes more important. Timely communication has been always very important, but especially when the crisis occurs, it becomes more so ever important than it used to be in normal days. So need to communicate timely, happily is important, calmly is important. then firm's operations are disrupted and customers will not know that what they will be and how they will be impacted at. So it's very important they have the right to know how are they going to be impacted because of this change. Last evening I have one of my my relatives were supposed to be flying from New York and their flight got delayed. So we are anxious till this moment, are they going to get a new flight or not? So this is exactly the company should be putting a notice saying that this company's operations are disrupted because of this and they will be resumed from this date. So there should be some accurate information being shared by the company, right? So this is why the crisis communication is very, very important, because employees are anxious. They are anxious about their career. They don't know either the company is going to call them after a few months or not. They would like to know that what is the situation. They would like, even the media would like to know the situation, and they will like to begin the communication part of it. So crisis communication becomes more important when you're staying in outside world. You do not have access, the information is very vague. So in that case it becomes very important that company starts immediate reaction to the situation possible with the as much accurate information as possible. Now, need for crisis communication. So crisis, as we all know, has some negative effect on the brand image of the product or company, right, or of the product rather. So this crisis communication experts, they say that the organizations they are exposed, or they are exposed to the organization's reputation, because crisis communication team are employed to save the reputation of the business or the brand image of the business. So crisis communication experts are very carefully chosen because they are the one who need to have resilience, who need to have accurate information, who need to know how to communicate, who need to know the sentiments of the people involved in the crisis. Okay. Then the main task of crisis communication team is to protect the brand identity and maintain the organization's standing. Generally, people who are working in a small company, they may not be able to follow this, but this is of utmost importance that companies do not actually intervene in the brand image of the company or the product. So crisis communication actually team has to help organization come out with some, out of the difficult situation they are encountering. They need to come out of that difficult situation with the flying colors in their hand. That is the sole objective of the crisis communication team at any workplace. Right? Now, the process of crisis communication. So, whenever a crisis has happened or has occurred, and the moment a business identifies it, what should be the first step as a process? Team should come out of its comfort zone, meet immediately and discuss the problem. That what is the problem, right? So, this really helps that team should speak out. They should talk to each other, they should meet immediately at the first possible situation or scenario. Then the management, the employee should not ignore any inputs from the external party. Even they become very important. There should be somebody who should be eyeing at what is reported by media. Their response should also cater or address to the response of the media. That is very helpful. So the business or the employees should actually not ignore any input and should take into consideration all the important points. There should be no team member who is criticizing individual. This is not a time for any blame game. No one should be claiming X did wrong or Y did wrong. Rather, team members should criticize the situation or understand the situation present in a way that the people are able to, or the team is able to take care of the crisis. Then the next thing as a part of process of crisis communication is the team should be working very effectively, very fast, and must encourage the workplace during crisis. They should actually ensure that there is effective communication across all the lines, and the communication containing relevant information must flow across different departments. So that's important part of the communication, business communication. And the crisis communication specialist, they say that there should be quick decision making, because your time and the accuracy of communication does matter a lot, right? So we cannot ignore it, that how much was time, my response time. We cannot actually ignore this. So crisis communication specialists need to learn to take quick decisions when it comes to crisis communication, for any business. So now I will talk about a model which we call as 5 C's model. So the 5 C's are used by the communication team or expert while dealing with a communication issue, while communicating with the crisis issue. Through communication they are solving the crisis, they are trying to reduce the negative impact of the crisis. So those 5 C's are the message. What are they meant for? These C's we are discussing with relation to the communication content. Okay, so the communication should have care. So the kind of communication a business is sending, it should show that business do care about employees, about stakeholders, about the growth of the employees, about their stock. So that care, the sense of care should be there in the message. Then there should be a sense of commitment. So business should be actually careful in saying what they are saying. So it should show that the business is still committed to the customer, to the stakeholder. That commitment sense is very, very important to continue gaining the trust of the stakeholders during those bad times. Also, the message, the communication should have a clear message about the competency of the business. So it should establish that we are still competent to serve you with the same quality or even the better quality. That's how it should go. The 4th C is community. So the message, the crisis communication should clearly show that the business is communal, and the business has concern for the community it serves or it works in, right? So company may need to spend a lot just to prove this fact that company or the business does impact the community of the society, the community of where the business works in. Then continuity. Business must be able to claim, to write that they are going to continue. They are not going to shut down because of this crisis. It's fine. They have enough energy, enough time to shut down, right? So this is how we take these 5 C's as very, very important C's as a part of communication plan. So I hope you are clear by this time that what is communication during the time of crisis, which we call as crisis communication, and what is the need or what is the importance of crisis communication during the time of crisis. Alright, so with that I would like to wind up now. Thank you very much for being with me. Thank you, friends.